Hey folks, how's it going? So before we dive into this review today, I just need to make an announcement, which is that this channel has officially surpassed 1,000 subscribers. Yes! Thank you all for tuning in for the past year and a half this channel's been active. And if you're just new to the channel, just tuning in for the first time, thanks so much. Welcome and thank you for subscribing. You folks have left me a ton of great, thought-provoking comments, and it's been a blast making these videos and chatting with you folks about this TV show that I've loved for basically my entire life. The subscriptions, likes, and comments are incredibly encouraging, and I feel more motivated than ever to keep putting out video reviews and informational videos for this channel, covering both Doctor Who and other entertainment media that interests me. Rest assured, I've got plenty more videos planned post-season, so stay tuned. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for your support. Now, on to the review. I'm always wary before a Doctor Who finale rolls around. The modern series doesn't exactly have a spotless history when it comes to their finales. Some of them are all-time classics. Epic, emotional roller coasters with amazing action sequences, revelations, and a feeling of catharsis when they draw to a close. And many of them are not. There's also the tendency of these two-parters to be very back-loaded, where the first episode is all set up, and the real meat of the story all occurs in part 2. This is so frequently the case that I often struggle to grade or review the first part in isolation, because it feels like just half a story, and I need to see the conclusion to see if everything in this first half worked. This episode definitely falls into that category. A lot of really interesting and potentially clever things happen here, but I'll need to see part 2 to see how much of this is actually essential to setting up the finale, and how much of it is just so much fluff. Filler to mark time until we get to the fireworks factory. Let's dig into it and see what this story has to offer on its own merits. Shidigawa has to play a not-himself human version in this story, a challenge that several other Doctor actors have had to take on during the course of this series. He does a good job of playing someone who's just on the cusp of realizing the truth, before getting pulled back into the reinforcing mantra of don't doubt. He's particularly good at playing up his disorientation when the Rani toys with him during their reunion. Belinda has an interesting role to play in this episode, although I do feel like she gets sidelined a bit, being more of an obstacle to the Doctor than a fully fledged co-star. She plays the confusion and fear of this dystopian housewife version well, and the moment where she runs off into the woods and starts screaming into the void is effectively chilling. I do find the whole concept of the Doctor and companion being hypno-married in this universe to be a bit creepy though, and I don't love seeing them wake up in a bed together and kiss. I also feel like Belinda's spotlight is taken away somewhat by the presence of Ruby, who feels like she gets to do a lot more of the companion adventuring this time. I like Ruby okay as a character, but I gotta say, I do feel like she's crowding out Belinda a little bit this season, and the Doctor as well to a degree. These seasons are just so short. Every scene where you're not focused on the Doctor or the companion is time lost from getting to know them better. Frankly, I feel like Ruby got way too much screen time in this episode, and I don't like how much more of a point of view character she felt than Belinda or the Doctor. I think Millie Gibson was reliable in her performance, but I'm starting to just question why is she even around? If Conrad was going to end up being such an important character, maybe it would have made sense to restructure the story so that Conrad was Belinda's love interest turned nemesis, not Ruby's. Because now, headed into the finale, I'm far more invested in seeing Ruby confront Conrad than anything Belinda has on her plate. I know her big mission was to get her home and see her parents, but now we've entered this weird alternate reality where Belinda's mother and grandmother are just there with absolutely no fanfare, and Belinda's core motivation wasn't focused on for a single moment during the entire course of the episode. And then we've got the villainous duo themselves, the Rani, played by Archie Punjabi, and the other Rani, formerly known as Mrs. Flood, played by Anita Dobson. Anita Dobson is enjoyably sinister in this story, especially when she's arresting Belinda or lying to Conrad about how important he is. She doesn't seem quite as submissive this story as she appeared at the end of the last one, grousing behind the other Rani's back about the chores she has to do, and even lightly teasing her about her self-parentage. I suspect that this other Rani is not as much of a submissive underling as the primary Rani might think, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a betrayal in the works. As for the Rani, the definite article you might say, Archie Punjabi delivers a fun, campy, menacing performance. The haughtiness, arrogance, and sly playfulness is still present, making this Rani feel very akin to the Kato Mara original. I have no doubt that Archie watched all of the classic Rani stories to prep for this role, since it feels like such a consistent extension of the classic character's personality. That entire opening scene where she murders/transforms that entire unlucky family is an appropriately chilling introduction. And the scene where she tangos with the doctor as she toys with him to jog his memory is the highlight of the episode. Then we've got the usual unit crew: Kate Stewart, Mel, Shirley, and Ibrahim. They all have minimal screen time, but do fine as always. This time playing memory-distorted 1950s versions of themselves. Shirley gets a bit more screen time, and has an interesting B-plot about the disabled and outsiders living homeless on the streets because Conrad doesn't think about them. Oh, and how could I forget? Poppy's back. Yes, the adorable captain from the horrible episode has returned for mysterious reasons, and she's now posing as Belinda and the Doctor's child. She doesn't have a horrific CGI mouth this time, so it's easier to appreciate her as just a cute baby. She's actually a surprisingly good actor for her age. I totally bought it when she said no.
Is that nice? No.
Now let's move on to the production and effects. As per usual, this episode looks expensive. There are a lot of cool, eerie shots of the Doctor and other people looking out over the London cityscape, or craning their necks to look up, to see the giant skeletal structure suspended in the air by giant pillars, and huge dinosaur-bone creatures lumbering about the city. It gives the episode an appropriately uncanny, dreamlike quality, especially when you have such sinister-looking structures juxtaposed against such bright and sunny imagery of a supposedly clean 1950s picturesque world. The Rani's entire base is a great combination of excellent set design, props, and costuming. I love how the walls, the ceiling, every surface feels organic, as if it was grown from the ground up like a giant skeletal flower. The computer women look super creepy and cool, kind of like the Cenobites from Hellraiser. A nice combination of technology and organic life to reinforce the Rani's expertise in biological experimentation. I also love that there are dinosaur bones wandering about, which is completely in line with the Rani's apparent fascination with dinosaurs.
The potential of the dinosaurs was never fully realized.
But enough about dinosaurs, let's get into the story itself. Like I said, this is a bit of a weird one, and I don't think I'll be able to fully assess how successful this episode is until I've seen the second half. But based on what we do have, I would say I did enjoy moments of it. It didn't completely lose me, but it did feel a bit wobbly at times. I'm generally not a huge fan of these types of stories, to be honest. Stories where the main character wakes up and doesn't know who they are, the world is entirely topsy-turvy, and every character we knew from the series is suddenly playing a different type of character with a different role. We've seen this a few times on Doctor Who. The Wedding of River Song, Human Nature, and The Lie of the Land spring to mind. Also the classic story Inferno. That's not to say I hate these types of stories. And in fact, I think Human Nature / Family of Blood is one of Doctor Who's all-time greats. However, I think this trick has diminishing returns the more often it's done, as the audience grows wise to it. What came off as disorienting and intriguing the first time it was played becomes a waiting game, where we, the audience, immediately clock that it's an illusion. The main characters are hypnotized, or they've entered an alternate reality, or a dream state, or an illusion or something, and we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the characters to realize what's going on and start acting normal again. If this type of story is told well, however, you can still keep the audience hooked anyways by feeding us a drip feed of clues that the protagonist can follow, so that we can still be engaged in our hero actively working towards solving the problem. This episode has a pretty good gimmick to keep the audience hooked. Whenever anyone expresses doubt, a coffee cup will suddenly fall off a table, distracting everyone and snapping them out of their doubt and back into the malaise they're all trapped in. I like that we never see the cups fall whenever it happens. We just hear the crash and then see the results every time. The eventual reveal that the cups fall through the table because tables don't do that is a nice Doctor Who-y touch. Oh yeah, and we get that crucial bit of info from none other than the Doctor's long-lost love interest from last season, Rogue. He's apparently been in a hell dimension that's collapsing in on itself, so that seems bad. But in spite of his predicament, and apparently facetious blaming of the Doctor, he still gives the Doctor this crucial bit of information. Or does he? Because here's the thing. The information that Rogue gives to the Doctor actually helps the Rani's plan, and moves the world closer to destruction, because it's the Doctor's doubt of this reality that the Rani is trying to cultivate. The timing of the message is extremely suspicious, since it seems to line up with the Rani's plan perfectly, to the point where she can literally break reality open on cue later in the episode. This makes me suspect that this wasn't a real message from Rogue, but just a dream projection created out of the Doctor's psyche. Even the whole thing about Rogue being trapped in a collapsing hellscape seems like that could just come from the Doctor's guilt and him imagining the most horrible place the Rogue could have been sent to. So the Doctor and Belinda are trapped in a wish world created by Conrad. This is clearly heavily inspired by classic dystopian society science fiction stories like 1984, Brave New World, or Fahrenheit 451. This is a well that Doctor Who has visited several times before, including the fairly recent past, specifically with the story The Lie of the Land. This world is the picture-perfect vision of what a modern-day, sexist, bigoted, conservative man would desire. A forceful, lockstep return to the rigid gender and sexual orientation roles of the 1950s, where women were expected to only be either wives or mothers and subservient to their husbands. Gay people don't exist, and disabled folks and other outsiders who don't fit into the perfect society are just left out on the streets to starve. This is not a particularly deep or nuanced portrayal of this concept, being more of a broad, expressionist take on the material, as has become the norm in this era of Doctor Who. Its points are blunt, but not disingenuous, and there is truth behind what's portrayed here. I think one thing this story is lacking in a bit would be the action department. We do get a cool, spooky sci-fi moment in the cold open, when the Rani obliterates that poor family. By the way, that whole flower petal transformation of the mother was a particularly well-realized bit of body horror. We get some scary villainous action at the start, and then things slow down quite a bit as we settle into the Doctor and Belinda's domestic existence. There are touches of intrigue and mystery dotted throughout to keep things interesting, like Ruby showing up on the Doctor's doorstep. But overall, the story does feel like it drags a bit at times. I think this is partially due to the fact that we all know this is a dream world of some sort, and we're anxiously awaiting the reveal. We're also aware that this is part one of a two-parter, so we know there's a ton more to get to even after the reveal of this story. So the episode ends up feeling like a waiting game. The episode does pick up nicely in its final few minutes, however. Pretty much from the time the Doctor discovers the table problem up through the end. Belinda freaks out and calls the police on her own husband, like you do when you're living in a dystopian thought police state, and creepy Officer Rani shows up to escort them to the base. I like the moment where the Doctor steps through the barrier on the ship, and then gives Belinda a reassuring pep talk to help her cross through the barrier and join him as well. He forgives her and reassures her that whatever's going on, he still trusts her as a friend and he still has her back. Very Doctor-like. It's a touching exchange that reconnects these characters right before heading into the final showdown, when it's crucial to bring these two characters back into focus as our core protagonists. And then we get the big, fun villain scene. The Rani camps it up in classic style, waltzing with her befuddled, amnesiac old nemesis, deepening the lore of the relationship with fresh tales of past adventures that may or may not have happened. She playfully teases the Doctor, grabbing him by the hand and dragging him from one piece of evidence to the next. It's revealed that the baby that the Rani stole at the beginning of the story is a young god, the god of wishes, and that the Rani is using Conrad to create an imperfect, wished world to trap the Doctor in. The Rani was able to do this by harnessing the power that was built up by the Doctor's Vindicator. Now, she's intentionally allowing the Doctor to doubt this flimsy facade of a reality, to the point where he fully realizes that it's false, which will break reality on a massive scale, because apparently Time Lords just realized that much harder, allowing the Rani to crack open reality and look beneath it. Because that's apparently where the guy is that she's really looking for. That guy just happens to be the one and only Omega. Omega! Well, what do you know? Another massive reveal of a classic villain. I guess I spoke too quickly last week when I said that the Doctor will be facing off against a flesh and blood villain rather than another giant CGI monstrosity. I'm just picturing giant CGI Omega, kind of like some sort of a giant Dark Souls creature, but still wearing his giant triangle helmet, and actually that looks kind of cool. Huh. Omega! Omega, for those of you unfamiliar with the classic series, was an ancient Time Lord who accidentally got himself trapped in an alternate antimatter dimension when he discovered the secrets of time travel during the dawn of the Time Lord civilization. The Time Lords benefited immeasurably from his discovery, but Omega himself was never able to bask in the glory or benefit from his own creation, instead living a cursed, undying existence in the antimatter dimension. He built a reality for himself using only his pure will and brilliant mind, constructing structures, technology, and even other living beings in this world. But he could never return to our universe, his entire body being absorbed into the antimatter realm, so that he was only a living mind. He grew insane and vengeful over the centuries, and eventually became a great threat to the Time Lords and the universe itself, crafting technology in the antimatter realm that he could use to attack our universe. The Doctor defeated him on 2 different occasions in the classic series. First by the combined efforts of the first 3 Doctors in the aptly named The 3 Doctors, and then later by the 5th Doctor in Arc of Infinity. He also apparently appears in the flashback history lesson that the Master gives during the end of the Timeless Children, according to official Doctor Who media posts, alongside Tecteun and Rassilon, the founders of Time Lord Society. Anyways, I don't know how I feel about this reveal. It makes me nervous, to be honest. Last season, the final episode really burned me, and I'm very apprehensive about that happening again. The first part of the 2-parter hummed along just fine, building up that fairly creepy and epic reveal of Sutekh at the end. Then part 2 just completely dropped the ball, causing a level of devastation so massive and universe-ending that we just knew it would be resolved by the end, followed by very little action before an embarrassingly easy defeat of this supposedly godlike entity, an absurd deus ex machina, and an intelligence-insulting reveal of Ruby's mother. This first episode was fine, but it just doesn't give me any faith that part 2 isn't going to completely drop the ball again. I'm just worried that part 2 is going to follow that same pattern. I'm afraid that they're going to build up the threat to a massive level that's going to require a deus ex machina at the end. I mean, I guess they already did that, kinda, by disintegrating the entire Earth, but who knows? They could always go bigger. I'm worried they're going to sideline the Rani as the villain and replace her with a big, dumb CGI monster man who just wants to destroy the entire universe. Again, I'm honestly struggling to imagine how Omega is going to be fundamentally different from Sutekh. Also, why is Poppy there? I know they had her show up for a spooky moment in the story in the engine, and then the giant mega corporation in the next episode was called Poppy Honey. But that still doesn't explain why she's here on Earth, or how the Doctor knows that Poppy is real, which is what he screams as he plummets to his doom at the close of the episode. I'm struggling to see how they tie all that together, or how it can feel satisfying if Poppy is the key to all of this. She hadn't been seen or mentioned since last season until just a few episodes ago, so it feels a bit random. My guess is the Doctor's saying that Poppy's a real person within the Wish world, and I think that everyone else on Earth got turned into make-believe Wish versions of themselves, who then disintegrated when the Doctor woke up and realized that it wasn't real. That's why we saw Belinda disappear and the other characters get crushed in the reality collapse. Actually, this is feeling oddly similar to the dusting of everyone last year. That's not great. But anyways, maybe because Poppy is real, she somehow gains control of the Wish world once it collapses. And the Poppy Honey Company from the far future is the end result of Poppy gaining power in the distant past, when the Earth was destroyed by the Rani. Maybe Poppy somehow inherits the Wish powers from the baby god. Or maybe Omega possesses Poppy, and that's why Poppy's legacy in the future is an evil mega corporation with her name on it. Regardless, it doesn't change the fact that the finale is in some way going to hinge on the character, who has had virtually no involvement whatsoever in the storyline this season, and just showed up randomly a couple episodes ago, is going to require an enormous amount of heavy lifting to make the answers feel earned and logical, rather than it feeling like the writer is just making stuff up on the spot. Given RTD's track record, I don't have a huge amount of faith, sadly. But nonetheless, I enjoyed this episode well enough, and I look forward to the finale with bated breath. I really don't know what grade this episode deserves, so for now, I'm going to give it a placeholder B. That grade will go either up or down next week based on how the finale plays out. And that is it. That is the end of my review. We have done 7 out of 8 episodes. Only the finale remains. Like I said in the review, I'm nervous. You know, RTD, he does not tend to land his finales. He's good at starting things, but he doesn't seem to know how to end his stories. He's got J.J. Abrams syndrome or something. But you know, I have faith. This has been a really, for the most part, solid season. Not perfect, but an enormous step up from last season. It's been mostly fun, mostly good. I've had a lot more fun reviewing this season, I think, than last season, just in terms of enjoying it on an episode-to-episode basis. I guess all the speculation about whether or not it's going to get canceled or renewed for a third season, and whether or not Ncuti's going to stay or not, that has made it not as fun. I don't want him to leave. I don't want the show to get canceled. He needs to have at least a third season. Like, it would feel just weird and wrong if he only had 2 and then left. So I'm really hoping that, after this finale premieres next week, they announce the season 3's on the books. It's being made officially, and Ncuti is officially sticking around for. That's what I'm hoping for. But that's about it. Thanks again to everyone, and just another shout out. Over 1,000 subscribers now. Thank you all for tuning in and watching my channel. Please join me next week for the finale review, and then after that I will do a season review where we'll do the fun thing of ranking the episodes. Everyone loves that. I love doing it. Let's do that. So until then, Kate, signing out.
Omega!